Hey guys, it's Rachel with Be Healed Dog Training, and I got a question submitted to me recently that I figured I would just answer in video format because this is a great question that I know a lot of people out there struggle with. So hopefully this can help lots of people. But the question was basically about this was someone who has like a 6-month-old dog. The age doesn't matter because people struggle with this with dogs of all ages. And the question was in regards to, when we're training, my dog is getting overly excited and kind of anticipating what I'm going to tell him to do. And he's jumping ahead and trying to, throw these other things at me, even when it's not stuff that I've asked for. So how do I kind of calm the dog down and refocus them without, crushing the dog's excitement? So, again, this is something I know a lot of people struggle with. So a couple of things here. Number one, don't worry that when you address this, you're going to kill the dog's spirit or, bring the dog down. I've heard a lot of people get concerned about that. Really, you're teaching the dog how to control that energy. So I love dogs who are energetic and willing, and we're not trying to turn that off, but we are trying to teach the dog how to control that when it's time to turn it on and off. And if we're talking training a family pet, we really want to work on bringing that energy down a fair amount. So obviously this is going to be a different approach than somebody who is training their dog obedience commands for like competition obedience or sport dog work, things like that. We're talking family pet training. So a couple of things to make sure that you are keeping in check. Your praise, make sure that it is neutral, calm, not overly excited. I see a lot of people who train and when the dog does something right, they're like, oh, good job. And that's, because we're excited for the dog. But what happens is that sends the dog, their energy kind of through the roof and they're like, yeah. And so we just want to make sure that, especially when we're training these dogs who get overly excited, that our praise comes down and down and down. We don't have to be super big cheerleaders for these dogs and like, woohoo! It can just be the dog does something right. We mark it with a calm good. Another great option is to clicker train. And that helps you just take all emotion out because when the dog does something right, you just click and give food and it lets you be really, really calm. So make sure that your praise is calm and make sure that what you're using as a reward is not overly stimulating for the dog. So for example, I use food training all the time, but if your dog's food sends them through the roof, if they're super food motivated, then sometimes that can actually hurt our training. Or if you're using a toy as reward, some dogs, the drive for the toy is so high that when we're using a toy, the dog just is too wound up. So just think about your praise. Is it helping the situation or hurting? And if it's hurting, then don't use that for a reward anymore. And instead just let your reward be a calm, like, good, yes. A release of leash pressure is actually a type of reward. So think about that. Another thing is to physically stop the dog from jumping ahead, meaning, let's say you're working on the down command and the sit command, and you put the dog in a sit and they fly into a down. You would have a leash on the dog. And if you have not asked them to down yet, you would say no, and you would just guide the dog back up with your leash into a sit. Keep your body language really calm, really slow. If you're working on place command and the dog is rushing onto place before you tell them to do it, then as you're walking to place, come to a stop, use your leash to reinforce that. So if the dog, tries to rush onto place, you guide them back with the leash. And again, you're just staying really calm through this whole process. You are calmly like, nope, that's not what I want. You're bringing the dog back. Make sure you're pausing and slowing yourself down in between things that you're asking the dog to do. And just breathe and be slow. And again, you want to kind of emulate what you want the dog to be doing. So if, the dogs that I work with who are super like hyped up and ready to go, I bring my own energy way down and I almost act just like nonchalant, the way I want the dog to act. So think about that. And if you have a dog who's really just being wacky and crazy and jumping all over you and stuff like that, you need to correct that behavior. So if the dog is truly just overly aroused, it's going to be much more difficult for you to get that dog to absorb the information you're trying to give them. And so if they're like jumping on you and spinning circles and running around, you can use a bonker, you can use a remote collar correction, you can use some sort of correction to put a stop to that behavior It's not going to crush your dog's spirit or soul. I promise. I do this all the time with the dogs that I work with. You have as long as you're delivering that correction very calmly, it's just a matter of fact, nope, this behavior that you're doing, too much. You got to stop. So the dog's jumping around, nope, throw the bonker, or nope, quick remote collar correction. The dog goes, whoa, what do you want me to do? And then I can tell the dog what to do and go from there. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Slow yourself down. Make sure your energy is super neutral. Have a leash on the dog so that you can be physically providing the dog with guidance and corrections. And your corrections don't necessarily always have to be punishment. It can just be information you're giving the dog. They rush to place, you correct them by guiding them back. Now, if the dog is really just rushing into stuff, especially if it's things that they know better, you can give a little leash pop. You can give a little bit of a correction. Again, you're not going to crush that dog's spirit. So hopefully this helps those of you guys who have dogs with this kind of overly excited, eager beaver syndrome, just help calm the dog down some so that they can absorb the new information. You can always jazz the dog up later if you're doing more like exciting work or doing, like playing with the ball or stuff. But when you're just practicing your in-home obedience, you want everything super calm.